Hello, dear friends. There may be a 3,000-year-old biblical mystery that affects our lives without us being aware of it. Opinion piece. Beginning of the end. Signs and omens. The mystery of the Shemitah. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Surprises are expected in October. 2022 would be the year of trumpets. Jupiter brings the expansion and optimism. What the hell is going on in the world? 2023 would be the year of the Great Tribulation. Some 27 countries in the world are bankrupt. He who controls the time controls society. The Shemitah ended on 25th September 2022. Let's start. Signs and portents are now everywhere, appearing continuously and increasing in number and intensity week by week. It is as if the universe has opened the cosmic floodgates, letting out a torrent of omens, signifying that an amazing change is on the horizon, according to a piece published by revisionist historians for world peace. It is all tied to the illusion of time, which is the ultimate control instilled at the highest level. However, what is critical to understand is that, although it appears that the father of lies is directing the next greatest show on earth, all that is about to happen will occur strictly according to a divine plan. But never forget that this divinely directed Great Tribulation can only unfold with such a dramatic effect and profound impact because the powers that be were temporarily given the power to run this great show. True worldly power is never revealed. It always remains hidden from view. If you think you see it, hear it, feel it, then it is not the real power. This permanent modus operandi is what allows the real worldly power to have remained in an ascendant position, as well as to continue to accumulate even more power for itself, though it is now in decline. The secret. Secrecy is the very essence of his control over worldly power. Therefore, they will always act with the utmost secrecy. With exposure comes vulnerability, and true worldly power will never run the risk of such potential revelation. Its superior position is forever maintained and solidified because it is a secret known to none but the power itself. Even those who reside near the pinnacle of world power never know from whom the orders and dictates originate. During the present state of conflict, true worldly power never changes hands. It may seem to, but in reality it never does. Just as the locus of geopolitical and military power controls the time, it controls the colony. Just as civilization seems to change over the millennia and centuries, from the Egyptians to the Greeks, to the Romans, to the French, to the Spanish, to the British, to the Americans, etc., the real power was the same behind these various thrones and armies. In the present dark and dense period of time, power always flows to those bloodlines that are beholden to the forces of darkness. Within every civilization, every culture, every society, every nation, every religion, every race, every tribe, every family, etc., there are those souls who are attracted to the light and those who cling to the darkness. However, there is one specific tribe that was given supremacy in the operational functioning of the whole show here on earth. Consequently, this tribe was temporarily given a position superior to all other groups and collectives. Because of the extraordinary influence and power that the prophets and astrologers exercised over this tribe, they were finally stamped into a pen of zealous religiosity, which eventually turned to the planet Saturn. In other words, they became a group of Saturnians willing to do anything under the sun to propitiate their particular god. Saturn versus Jupiter. The terrestrial plane of existence and the space-time continuum are distinguished by many polarities. The third density of this solar system is defined by polar opposites, which not only attract each other with great force, but can also repel each other depending on the particular context. Herein lies the beginning of the clash of the Titans that has been in continuous conflict since time immemorial. After the emperor of this solar system known as the Sun, there are the major planets, which are Jupiter and Saturn, and which have a constant rivalry. Each always strives to gain ascendancy in its own right. Because these two immense planets are so great, their effects on the world are also enormous. He who controls the weather controls the colony. He who controls the time, not weather, the time, controls the colony, as well as the civilization. Because of this cosmological reality and astrological fact, the people who populate the Earth are unavoidably affected by the powerful energies of Jupiter and Saturn in very profound ways. With this critical understanding of how the heavens above reflect the Earth below, it will be much easier to understand what the hell is going on in the world right now. Siblings have been competing since time immemorial. Not only do they compete, sometimes they fight to the death to succeed the current ruler, or simply one kills the other like Cain and Abel. This epic clash has been overseen by a higher force which we will refer as the Sun Father. The Father Time. Saturn is well known to be the bearer of karma. As the planet responsible for the adversities of life, it delivers every trial and tribulation just in time. For that reason, it is also known as the Father Time. During the darkest age, Saturn brings an enormous amount of negative karma accumulated by humankind as always. Early religion actually worshipped Saturn, while Jesus the Christ was a Jovian at heart, Jupiter being the planet of the spiritual master for humankind. In other words, while Saturn plays the bad cop, Jupiter plays the good cop. While Saturn brings nothing but misfortune, Jupiter brings expansion and optimism. Some ancient societies choose to propitiate or placate the wrathful god of Saturn with human sacrifices, while other ancient religionists decided to glorify the deity of Jupiter, knowing that deep spiritual wisdom would be the great benefit of such a relationship, the ultimate gift being enlightenment. The Saturnians became warlike, while the Jovians became peacemakers and conciliators, but the predators preyed on the weak because they perceived peace as a symbol of weakness. It is this incessant warfare between Saturnians and Jovians that has wreaked havoc across the planet for eons, and because of the extreme breaking point that all planetary civilization has reached, this epic war is now in its final crescendo towards the final climax of an epoch. Therefore, what all of humankind is now experiencing is the last battle of the final war between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. The Saturnians are militating on behalf of Saturn, and the Jovians are defending the kingdom of Earth from many attacks on the human spirit, the human soul, and the human body. If any historian would objectively consider the scope and magnitude, as well as the severity and devastating impacts of the list of cataclysms, he could sensibly conclude that he who controls the weather controls the colony, just as the civilization of humankind has lived through the Great Tribulation for many decades. Prophecies. Worldly affairs are controlled by cryptic and obscure prophecies, calendar predictions. Most of these ancient prophecies and supporting predictions were originally handed down through ancient oral traditions. When they were fulfilled, they were written down on scrolls and tablets. In this way, they could be referred to at critical moments to impress upon future generations the awesome power of the prophets. For millennia, the carrot and stick prophecy became a very useful tool for keeping the congregation, as well as entire populations, under tight control. As cities sprang up on the plains and dotted the coasts, immorality and misdeeds increased. The ruling class increasingly turned to prophets and astrologers for artificial divine intercession. The key point here is that some of the religious organizations that emerged from this polarized context used prophecy in a less than honorable way. In certain places and times, prophecies were uttered and written down so that they could be cynically fulfilled. In such cases, the prophets chosen by the ruling clique who fabricated the prophecy were also in a position to guarantee its manifestation on a specific day and in a specific place. Calendars. The 7 years Shemitah cycles and their jubilees have been shown to relate directly and with astonishing accuracy to many of the major world events of the last 200 years. The Shemitah uncovers and reveals a new field of astonishing mysteries, so great that they underlie everything from world wars to the rise and fall of nations, economic recession, financial meltdown, and the future itself. As soon as the Jews settled in Israel, the counting of the 7-year cycle began, where the culmination of each cycle is a sabbatical year, called Shemitah, which literally means to slow down or stop. For example, the year after the destruction of the Second Temple was the first year of the 7-year sabbatical cycle. If the above is fulfilled, the hands of Yahweh will richly reward the faithful, as stated in Leviticus 25, 21, 22. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai and said to him, in quotes, "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them that when they enter the land which I am giving them, the land shall rest in honor of the Lord. You shall cultivate the land for 6 years, and during those 6 years you shall plant your vines and gather it in their fruit. But in the 7th year the land shall rest. It is a rest in honor of the Lord, and you must not cultivate your land or plant your vines." Financial cataclysms. Because the prophecies were planned in advance, they were able to be properly executed at the appointed time in the right place. Virtually, all of the financial and economic cataclysms that have aligned with the biblical timeline of Shemitah have had far-reaching global consequences. All of the world's major calendars have been contrasted by those who were steeped in the ancient wisdom of occult astrology and Kabbalistic numerology, Hermetic Freemasonry, and esoteric scripture. Each was created with great purpose and prophetic foresight. Not only are they pregnant with deep spiritual and worldly significance, but all possess varying degrees of predictive power. The pervasiveness of the Western calendar throughout the world is the product of a bygone era when the center of the world was Rome. The British Empire was also very strict about applying English timekeeping wherever they claimed a new colony or established a new settlement. This is precisely why Greenwich Mean Time is calibrated from mean solar time at the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, London. He who controls the time controls the colony, as well as civilization. In addition, the Gregorian calendar, the West has been influenced by calendars from the East. Both the Chinese New Year and the Indian celebrations of Holi and Diwali are observed by growing segments of the population. However, it is the Hebrew calendar that has exerted the greatest influence. Jubilee. The key concept here, highlighted by several expert authors, is the release of debts, which should occur if there is to be renewal of the land and rebirth of the people. When debts are properly discharged, God is pleased and the future will be bright and prosperous. When debts are not released, judgment comes upon the land and the people. It is often in this kind of biblical context that the ram's horn of trumpet is blown. Its sounding is a cause for great celebration, for anticipated prosperity and happiness, which in this case comes with the release of debts, or the blowing of the trumpet signals, an approaching judgment, and therefore causes much apprehension, fear, and even dread for what the future might bring. Because the Shemitah of 2021-22 is followed by the Jubilee year 2023, whatever outcome finally manifests itself will be greatly magnified. In other words, when the trumpets finally sound, there will be no mistaking their prophetic message. The unfolding destiny of each nation involved during this 70th Jubilee is as inexorable as the future destiny and fortunes of the world at large. The world community of nations has never been so interconnected. Because certain national and regional destinies are now intertwined, the fate suffered by one country can easily overwhelm another. Conversely, the degree of good fortune experienced by a given region or nation will naturally be enjoyed by its neighbors. Therefore, when the trumpets of the biblical Shemitah finally sound during the coming Jubilee, all will hear that they will according to their fate and fortune. The biblical Shemitah has proven to be the most momentous year for the world at large over the last 100 years. This name Shemitah is given to every seventh year in the Hebrew calendar. The current Shemitah year actually began at sunset on Monday 6 September 2021 and ends on 25th September 2022. It's to say it is finished. The Shemitah is unique in that it specifically affects the economy and financial realms of the nation, wiping out all credit and debt accounts. For the nation that turns away from God, the Shemitah becomes a sign of judgment. The Shemitah year reaches its culmination on the last day of the Hebrew year. With the internet making insider information such as this available, perhaps a fateful economic and financial future can still be avoided. The Great Tribulation. Then there is this integral connection between the Jubilee, the Shemitah, and the Great Tribulation. Thus, the 7-year Great Tribulation begins with the end of 2022 Shemitah. The tetrad of blood moons that occurred in the course of the last Shemitah cycle, 2014-2015, was a prophetic heavenly sign, provided by the heavens as a warning that the world is now in the final period of the 7-year final stretch until the Great Tribulation that would begin in September 2022. The word Jubilee comes from the Hebrew word Yovel, meaning trumpet or ram's horn. According to this interpretation, the oft-prophesied 7-year Great Tribulation would begin in earnest during the 2022-2023 time frame. The blowing of the Old Testament ram's horn always accompanied the inauguration of great celebration, as well as serving as a divine announcement of apocalyptic events. Throughout the book of Revelation, the biblical trumpet blast precedes the 7 major prophecies that would soon unfold the earth, which St. John saw in his meditative visions on the island of Patmos. In this way, The trumpet blast functions as both a dire warning and an urgent wake-up call. When the seventh trumpet is blown, it is then that the door of the Holy of Holies in the temple of heaven is opened, and the Ark of the Covenant is seen, and the 24 elders announce that the time of judgment has come. If 2022 is the year of trumpets, when time literally stands still, 2023 would become known as the year of the Great Tribulation. Remember that much of the Jewish prophecy contained in modern altered Bibles has been pronounced and written down so that it can be fulfilled by the powers that be. Predictive programming not only sets up all humankind to accept what is coming as the fulfillment of Scripture, but the prophets of any given society will appear as true soothsayers. These prophets can be used to move the masses from one side to the other, depending on where the power elite want them to be. As for the correlation between the Shemitah, the Jubilee, and the Great Tribulation, everything points to the autumn Moedim of 2023. The autumn Moedim refer to the three final divine signs that occur each and every year between the beginning of September and the end of October. Those three major Jewish religious celebrations are Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Red October. It also means that the whole month of October will see everything, particularly during the run-up to the long-awaited midterm elections. One should expect one surprise after another until 8th November 2022. 30th September was the Vatican's payment deadline for the owners of US Inc., the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF. The new fiscal year began on Saturday, 1st October in the US. On Saturday, 8th October, a mega black swan event was scheduled to occur, although nothing can be certain. Most intelligence sources say that the 10 days of darkness often reported will be towards the end of October, but nothing is certain. The midterm elections could be delayed by a month while a false flag event occurs. No one wants the elections, neither the white hats nor the black hats. The whites because they believe the system is rigged, and the blacks because they know they will lose. BlackRock and Vanguard have declared bankruptcy. The banks are collapsing. The old world order is collapsing, and the Davos Forum is about to collapse. We are not far from the total collapse of the global financial system. Many banks will fail. You will think you have lost everything because you will not be able to withdraw cash from your bank for about 10 days. However, this was planned and you are covered. The new quantum financial system has your bank account mirrored. The internet will go offline. Communications blackout is coming. Project Odin. These are operations to bring down all this evil. This is not to scare you, but to get you ahead of it. None of these statements are to bring fear. God is in complete control and there is no reason to be afraid. Awaiting developments. We are on the cusp of a series of huge events. Shemitah, the last year of a 7-year cycle in the Jewish calendar, brought immense financial hardship to the world several times in the past. The major Wall Street crash of 1987 occurred during Shemitah, as did the bond market carnage of 1994. The 9/11 attack occurred one day after Shemitah in 2001, and the Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy and the subsequent 777-point drop in Dow Jones in 2008 also happened around Shemitah. The 9/11 attacks set the stage for the following to happen. The stock market shutdown began on the same day and remained closed until 17th September 2001. Rosh Hashanah began on Monday, 17th September. Then there were the various stock market crashes that occurred during the second half of September and throughout the month of October 2008. The stock market crash began on Black Monday. 15th September 2008, with the collapse of Lehman Brothers, Rosh Hashanah began on Monday, 29 September of that year. In view of the fact that there are now so many red flags jumping all over creation, there is no doubt that this autumn could see a stunning crash and burn event or some kind of trigger event that causes a perfectly organized domino effect. Remember that all the choreographed dramas in the financial capitals of the world will be part of a highly controlled demolition of the global economic and financial system. Collapse. 27 countries of the world are inside the collapse. The collapse of Europe and the countries of the world begin a rapid and steady rebound. Sky News says the Bank of England is on the verge of collapse. Mortgage lenders in the UK have stopped granting mortgages. In London, some 25 hotels were booked for up to 3 years. Overnight, a military presence arrived in dark green suites. No one knows who the young military men are and why they are there. The Scottish government orders an inquiry into the mysterious spike in newborn baby deaths. Germany warns of blackouts and is in the depths of collapse. The blackouts would come from lack of gas to produce electricity for mobile phone coverage for 84 million citizens. Italy's new Prime Minister wants the elite and says her people are taking back the country from the New World Order. Pakistan collapse after Prime Minister resigns. Sri Lanka's collapse now reaches over 70% inflation. Venezuela's collapse now reaches over 75% inflation. Yemen within economic collapse as funding for armed forces is low. Slovakia's economy in collapse. China expected to send military naval fleets to European oceans in mid-October. Expect increasing resistance from corporations to accept cash payments and a general attack on the use of cash. Remember that cash is evidence of their debt to you, and they want to destroy that physical evidence just as they burnt books that exposed them in centuries past. Shutdown. As the truth comes out, the dark side players will try to stop it with a communication blackout. The Space Force has just taken control of the military satellites. The wireless network is ready. The dark side will try to push for a narrative change, but this will fail. It's about to get very bumpy. Buckle up. Fasten your seatbelts. Will the collapse of Credit Suisse be Europe's Lehman Brothers moment? By Michael Snyder. Credit Suisse is one of the linchpins of the entire international banking system. If it were to fail, the ripple effects would be felt very deeply in literally every nation of the planet. Credit Suisse could be on the verge of collapse, and we are warned that if it collapses, it could cause a shock similar to that caused by the failure of Lehman Brothers Bank in September 2008. Speculation about the future of the Swiss banking giant has been rife for several months in the markets, in business and political circles, as well as on social media. Perfect Storm by Max Labo. The executive director of the United Nations World Food Programme, David Beasley, says the perfect storm has arrived on our doorstep. Beasley urges people to donate to the United Nations, particularly Gulf nations and billionaires, asking them to give a few days' earnings to address a crisis with fertilizer supplies right now and avoid the widespread food shortages next year. Movements. Hungarian forces begin sealing the 250-mile border along Serbia's southern region, secretly conducting military exercises and placing artillery and ammunition in the northern and western territories with air defense missile systems delivered by China in the summer. Large-scale military exercises on the north and east of the UK being conducted with NATO. A 500-mile-long wall of fleets skirts the British coast. German military defense exercises in the northern region on both sides of the oceans conducted with air support systems and readiness operation. Kaliningrad activates the danger area with Russian submarines close to the area. Like Poland, NATO ships create a barrier near Poland. Romanian forces conduct military drills and create a military wall with hundreds of tanks and fighter planes in the eastern regions. This military wall front is connected with the Hungarian military wall front. Russia never signed the treaty to end the Second World War, says Sorjafal. Moscow is insisting on an investigation into attacks on the Nord Stream 1 and 2 gas pipelines, the Russian embassy in the US said on Wednesday. The latest attempt to start World War III was seen last week when the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines supplying Russia gas to Germany exploded. It was immediately followed by the announcement of an alternative pipeline supplying gas from Norway to Poland. In addition, Germany will now have to pay transit fees to Ukraine and Poland for gas from a pipeline that probably does not exist yet. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.